Hi everybody, Eric White here from NJHFA. I want to talk about Meyer's use of Irongate, Eisenport, and how he seems to demonstrate or suggest that Irongate actually is conflated oftentimes with schrankhut, or the cross guard or the barrier guard. I want to explain why that is and how Meyer ultimately is interpreting the use of Irongate in its relation to the cross guard. So, in simple terms, Irongate has your right leg out, your sword is over your right knee, the pommel's hanging down, the point is up to your opponent's face like this. Now, Meyer says that in his time, a lot of fencers are simply using Irongate and schrankhut interchangeably. He notes that it's because of the absence of the thrust, or the disuse of the thrust in the German swordplay rather than in the Italian. But in any case, he seems to suggest at least that the modern, the 1570 contemporary sword fighters, the masters, are using the Irongate and schrankhut interchangeably. Excuse me. Now, interestingly enough, cross guard or schrankhut, which is here, is very easily gotten to from here. All you simply do is put the point down here. And here, in this motion, you can see some of the utility of Eisenports. But how do we know Eisenport or Irongate is used in that manner? Well, Meyer specifically says, I'll speak more about this in the rapier section. So let's look at the rapier section. And in the rapier section, this is the Dr. Jeffrey Forgeng translation. He says, from this position, or for this position yourself thus. Stand with your right foot forward as always. Hold your weapon with your arm extended down and forward before your right knee, so that the point extends forward up against the opponent's face. And if you look at the rapier section, you can see this is basically how he's holding the sword. In this posture, you're not only well protected from your opponent's thrusts and cuts as behind an iron door, but also you can confidently crowd upon him from here with all kinds of devices, if you use the weapon and technique correctly in this posture. So obviously the crowd him part is really important. How do you crowd someone with Irongate here? And he explains, you can also hold your weapon this way and pull it toward the right and left side, or send it to the side as well as straight before you. Now, pulling it and sending it, those two words are very important, and this is one of the reasons why I teach that close reading of the sources is vital to understanding and interpreting them properly. If you're holding Irongate and you pull it to the side, think of the literal word to pull, to bring closer to me. Well, it's not that I'm going to take Irongate and pull it in this way, because obviously this is not very martially sound. To pull my defense closer to my body would make it easier for an opponent to strike me, either with a thrust or with a cut. So what does it mean to pull Irongate close? Well, my interpretation is simply this. You pull it here, or you pull it here. So the Irongate, when you pull the Irongate, when you pull it to the side, becomes essentially schrankhut. So it's a very easy transition. And this is where academically, to write Irongate and schrankhut into a book is to differentiate between them. But practically, when we're fencing, to say, well, I'm using Irongate or am I using schrankhut, as long as you're protecting yourself, it honestly doesn't matter unless you're involved or engaged in an academic conversation as to what you just did. So, important to understand this relationship then. Irongate can be pulled to the side here. He also says Irongate can be, or send it to the side as well as straight before you. Send it to the side. So just to send it, to just pull it, or I use the word there, right? Push it or move it to the side. So I can pull it back here, or I can simply move Irongate, pull, pull, which is different from, say, Nebenhut and swinging this way. This could be considered a pull as well. I could simply pull it that way, but I think if you recognize that Meyer's saying there's a similarity between the schrankhut and Eisenport, between that crossed guard and Eisenport, the pulling it back actually gives you the crossed guard, and therein lies a pretty obvious connection between the two guards. And we'll see this more in the Eisenport play, where Meyer explains, this is page 84 of the Forgeng translation, he explains that what you're to do in Eisenport is to actually go up with crossed hands and deflect the incoming strike with the strong of your weapon. So with crossed hands is to come up in this manner here. And we can notice schrankhut extended up this way is very similar. It's in fact exactly the same. So herein lies the relationship between Eisenport and schrankhut, and that relationship is important to understanding the Eisenport plays, which I'll demonstrate in a moment. So I'm standing here with my daughter Avienda. She's been gracious enough to help me out with the Irongate play. You want to say hi, Abby?
Hi.
So she's going to start in Vomtag. She's using an arming sword. It's smaller for her, but we can use it as a close approximation anyway for Longsword good enough. So she starts in Vomtag. I'm going to start in Eisenport here. Now, Joachim Meyer says essentially you can use the Eisenport with crossed hands to stop the cut, the incoming cut, with the strong of your sword. So the incoming cut comes in, crossed hands stops the cut. Now you don't want to get too deep here because you'll see Meyer's play continues with further cuts, but you want to get that strong up towards maybe the bottom of the weak. That way you know you're well defended as she cuts in here. Now, once you're here, Meyer says the opponent's going to want to pull back to cut around. As she pulls back, I'm going to cut a low cut to her arm. So she has the tempo to pull back. I use that tempo to cut to her arm. So it's going to start like this again. 1, 2, 3. Meyer actually says low cuts plural if you look at the text. So again, cut. She pulls back, 1, 2. Now that I have her thinking low, Meyer finishes with cut high to the head. There's a cut to the head. So here's the whole play. There it is. You can see those low cuts are provocations to pull her guard away from her head as she goes low to block them, which obviously then opens up the head for a cut. Now, there are other iterations that Meyer offers for Irongate right afterwards. So, if she starts in Vomtag, I'm in Eisenport here, and she cuts. From this position, Meyer says you can wind your short edge to your opponent's right ear. So I unwind my sword to hit her in her right ear, right here. So it looks like this again. There's the winding. Turn it straight in. It's a very quick, put some pressure on the blade, there you go. Very quick, easy hit. Now, most likely, she's going to want to block that. So, as she goes to block that, simply by pushing her long edge towards it, she just did it naturally. Meyer says, then wind through with your pommel to her left side and strike on the left side of the face. So to wind through the pommel, you're going to bring the pommel underneath here. The sword point goes down and around and hits on the left-hand side. So it looks like this. There's the full play. Lastly, Meyer also mentions that if your opponent strikes low while you're in Eisenport, all you need to do is simply use your long edge in long point. So can you cut by inverting the sword and coming down like that? Yes, that's a low cut, right? So as a low cut comes in, if you're in Eisenport, you simply use, bring it up a little higher. So your target's going to be right here. There you go. Let's try it again. You simply use your long edge and long point, and that stops the low cuts easy enough. Awesome job, Larry. I'm impressed. Now I want to make sure I have that correct, because that's important. Right.